Everybody, last patch, plated steel caps was changed in a way that has massively impacted the game. It read, in autos and auto, no matter the code. Steel caps now looks for all auto attacks for its damage reduction rather than auto attacks tagged with just auto attack and nothing else. Plated steel caps would reduce the damage from all auto attacks by 12%. Or so you thought. It didn't, actually. And a lot of the things that it now impacts through this change have massively rebalanced, I'll say, the game. A lot of the champions that weren't affected, you thought were affected, but weren't, but now are affected. So we're going to look through those right now. Now, just to be clear, most things in the game were already affected by the 12% damage reduction. Most things were already affected. That's not what's important. What's important is what is now affected by the 12% damage reduction. What do those things include? Well, Heartsteel. The proc of Heartsteel is now affected by plated steel caps. Belveth's Q is now affected by plated steel caps. Annie's Tibber attacks are now affected by plated steel caps. Belveth's E hits are now affected by plated steel caps. That's right, Belveth got double whammied right there. Belveth's Q, when she goes whoop over you, and Belveth's multi-hit on her E, were not being affected. They are now being affected. Blitzcrank's E was actually, shockingly, not being affected. That's right, Blitzcrank's E, when they reworked it a bit ago, stopped being affected by plated steel caps, and now is being affected by plating steel caps. Camille's Q1 and Q2 physical damage is now being affected by plated steel caps. Somehow the physical damage was not being affected by plated steel caps, and now it is. The true damage continues to not be affected by plated steel caps because you can't reduce true damage, but the physical damage is. Darius's W, that's right, Darius's W is now being affected by plated steel caps. Darius's W. Yes, you all probably rushed plated steel caps into Darius, and it wasn't even being affected by plated steel caps. So as a preliminary, don't take these as gospel, but as a preliminary change, let's look through here. We can see Darius has gone, last patch at all ranks, he had a 49%. This patch, he still has a 49%. Okay, well, this is early in the patch, so we're looking at some other champions over Darius, okay? So Darius is now being affected by plated steel caps. Mundo's E is now being affected by plated steel caps. That's right. Mundo's E was not actually getting reduced by plated steel caps. Here's a big one. Ezreal's Q was not being affected by plated steel caps. Yes, that one is fairly impactful, actually. Ezreal's Q is now affected by plated steel caps. Fiora's Q. That's right. Fiora's Q was not being affected by plated steel caps. So, all you people who are rushing plated steel caps into Fiora, it was only reducing her auto attack and her E. It wasn't actually reducing her Q. Fizz's Q, the physical portion of his Q, is now being reduced by plated steel caps. Gangplank's Q, no, I shit you not, Gangplank's Q was not being reduced by plated steel caps. Gangplank's pistol shot was not being reduced by plated steel caps. As we've seen throughout the nerfs he received in the patch, and now the nerfs from plated steel caps, bum rushing, everyone already bum rush plated steel caps into Gangplank, and he has seen a near 2.5 win rate decrease. Because his Q not being affected by plated steel caps, shockingly, was making him a bit harder to lane against than he was supposed to be. So, bit of an oof on that one. Garen's Q is now being affected by plated steel caps. That's right, Garen, his Q was not being affected by plated steel caps. So, we haven't seen a real win rate difference from Garen, but once again, we're still early in the patch. But Garen's Q is now being reduced by plated steel caps. Hecarim's E is now being reduced. That one's not a big deal. Illaoi's W, both the melee and the leap version, are now being reduced by plated steel caps. Illaoi's W, that's our big hit. Irelia's Q. Yes, Irelia's Q was not being reduced by plated Steelcaps. You guys rushing plated Steelcaps into Irelia were not actually reducing her damage. Ivern's Daisy attacks were not being reduced. Not really that big a deal. Malzahar's Voidlings, I guess if you built plated Steelcaps into Malzahar. So, Miss Fortune's Q was not being affected by plated Steelcaps. You heard me here, right. Miss Fortune's Q was not being reduced by plated Steelcaps. Nasus's Q was not being reduced by plated Steelcaps. I'm interested. We're still early in the patch, but I'm interested here as to, has he seen a substantial win rate? Okay, so Nasus so far, Gangplank and Nasus are probably the two most affected by this. Gangplank is down a lot. Nasus was at 51.75%. Nasus is now at 50.56% at all ranks, which includes the low ranks. Now, we don't have a lot of matches in yet, but boy oh boy, Nasus's Q now being affected by plated Steelcaps certainly does do a lot. Nidalee's Q in her Cougar form was not being affected. Senna's Q was also not being affected. To be honest with you, I don't know if that one really should be affected, considering it's more of an ability than an auto attack. Okay. Shyvana's second Q hit in her human form is now being affected. Her first hit was affected. Her second hit was not affected. In her dragon form, all hits on her Q are now being affected. In her dragon form, all her Q hits were actually ignoring plated Steelcaps. Now they don't. Here's another big one. Trundle's Q. That's right. Trundle's Q is now being affected. Trundle's Q was not being affected by plated Steelcaps. So if we look here, he's not being picked very much, but we can see, oh boy. Can we maybe look at him in the jungle? Nope, because no one plays Trundle jungle. Well, unfortunately, Trundle's not even being picked enough for anyone to care that he's now being affected. Okay, Udyr's W-empowered healing hits weren't being affected, which isn't really that big a deal. Only the auto attack, but only when they healed him, they were ignoring, yeah. So, Vayne's Q is now affected, but the true damage is not affected. That's right, everyone. All you people who fought Vayne top and you rush plated Steelcaps, her entire Q was ignoring plated Steelcaps. Now, the bonus damage ignores plated Steelcaps for some reason. I don't really know why. I mean, Garen's entire Q is affected, but Vayne only gets the base damage. Okay, sure, why not? So, Vayne's Q now has the base damage affected. Viego's R to the most wounded target. So the primary target of Viego's R now gets 12% damage reduction from plated Steelcaps. Victor's Q attack, not really that big a deal. Volibear's Q, not really that big a deal. Volibear's W, starting to kind of be a big deal. His Q and his W are affected. This is going to hurt Volibear Nation. Warwick's Q is affected, and Warwick's R is affected. That means that, yes, into Warwick, the best item now is plated Steelcaps. Wukong's Q and Yorick's Q, neither of them were being affected. Wukong's Q and Yorick's Q are both being affected. How will this affect Yorick Nation? Well, let's actually look. So last patch, Yorick had a 52.49% win rate. This patch, Yorick has a 51% win rate. So if you consider that as you rank up, Yorick does worse, it's highly likely that between the nerf on the nerf on Yorick's E and now the nerf for plated Steelcaps affects his Q, it's highly likely now that Yorick is going to sleep. In fact, actually, Yorick's Q, Yorick's E leap on his ghouls, and Yorick's R maiden attack are now all affected. Evidently, all of these are now affected. So, as you might suspect, a lot of champions have been massively impacted by this. We would probably have seen a large win rate decrease on Trundle if anybody played him. At either rate, building plated steel caps should now actually make sense. Gangplank way down, Nasus down, Garen. Yeah, Garen's a little affected. Doesn't seem to really be hitting him that much. So, yeah, plated steel caps now actually affecting everything, including Heartsteel, will very likely affect a lot of different things. Will we see some Gangplank Q buffs after this? Potentially. But that's it. So, I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. I hope you enjoyed this.